All right, we're back with more college football coverage, and in this one, I'll be covering the Week 13 games, albeit in a little bit of a condensed fashion, just to ensure that I can get over to some other things. But to start things out with number 22 Missouri at number 8 Oklahoma, and Missouri got started off in the most optimal way imaginable, spamming runs with Ahmad Hardy, the breaking tackles man himself, and getting down the field for a field goal. The only issue with that is what else did they really do in this game? Yes, Hardy is a player who's going to get his, but when I saw that Guillory, of all players on this Oklahoma defense, was able to stuff him in the backfield for a tackle for loss earlier in this game, some fishy stuff was about to be going down here. He's not a player that you can hold down forever. He's not a player that you can get down on first contact. But Oklahoma did a great job the entire game of swarming his ass, regardless, limiting the damage that he was trying to impose. And it just bled into them struggling pretty much everywhere else. Now, Hardy definitely had a great game last week. There's no denying that. But without Hardy getting going at all, if he can't establish anything, this Tigers team is nothing. And it kind of reminds you of how things were back in 2023, I guess, when, let me make sure I got the name right, because, hold on, yeah, Cody Schrader, right, when he was there, their offense was just a similar way, and I tell you, it wasn't all how you really would think it is. A lot of it came down to the fact that Oklahoma's defense, even without R. Mason Thomas, is still pretty fucking elite through and through. Not to mention the Lewis guy continued to fly all over the field. They had Spears Jennings, who actually got hurt for a little bit in this game, doing a great job of playing center field and forcing Pribula, who actually did return in this game, into some terrible decisions. And then not to mention Heineke playing center field the entire time, just flying all over the fucking place. There was nothing they could do about it. Bowen also is a really good player for this defense, and it wasn't surprising to see him come up with not only an interception as the game progressed, but also managing to get in for a block. After the earliest field goal that Mizzou had, he almost got his fucking hands on it completely and just barely missed it, leading to the field goal nearly missing itself. It wasn't all bad for Missouri. This Coleman Jr. guy at wide receiver did have a 115-yard game on 7 receptions, but with him as well as some of the other perimeter guys, they kept dropping the fucking football. Pribula's not a guy who can take over a ball game by throwing the ball necessarily. I think that's been understood since he's been at Penn State, and we knew that even when he was the backup there. But you got to be able to help him out at least. And some of these were just boneheaded. Completely just crazy stuff to watch. To think, too, that with Mizzou's defense as well going up against this Oklahoma offense, they themselves did a great job of containing them. Now, yeah, Mateer on the ground was naturally going to get his work in, but they held Robinson down, who'd been having a good stretch of games and has become their main guy. He was held to just 42 rushing yards. They clogged up his rushing lanes whenever they were trying to get him going. And as for the passing game, oh my goodness, it ain't all about the quarterback. But anytime you hold somebody to 46.7% completion percentage, I don't care what the fuck it looks like. Yes, there were some overthrows, underthrows from John Mateer in this game. There were also some drop passes on his end. But if you're holding him to that, and a couple of those Oklahoma losses this season have come down to him struggling to be efficient from the field as a general back there. The recipe was there for them at least but they could not generate offense. And as good as that defense was holding up, both of the touchdown drives were just completely backbreaking. Completely backbreaking. I mean, for one, you give up a short field to them and allow them to go on a good enough drive prior to the end of the half to get one of their other wide receivers in for a score. And then this one, which happened beforehand, was probably the straw that already broke the camel's back, to be completely honest with you, even though it happened so early on. Because for you to force them into a 3rd and long on their side of the field, and you have Mateer damn near trapped to where he somehow gets the ball at a sidearm angle on some baseball shit, throws a rocket over to a crossing Satania III, and he just runs like a madman, untouched down the sideline. Get a fucking miles per hour log on that. Brother hauled ass and he was gone for an 87-yard touchdown run, the highest of, well, the longest catch of his career, I should say. And then also the longest pass of the season for them as well. That can't happen. It was so ill-timed. But they genuinely played him that well. Like, Oklahoma in the second half, when you look at it, yeah, they started out getting a field goal themselves, but you have a total of 6 punts in this half. Defense did their job here. So where's the idea of paying it forward? Like, I mean, damn, bro. You don't have a response in you at all? That would have helped mightily here. That's certainly tough. But, yeah, just a tough one there. As for some of the other numbers here, yeah, aforementioned Satania III, pretty good game for him, I guess, factoring in that 87-yard touchdown score and 3 receptions on 109 yards. Heineke on the defensive end had 10 tackles. Lewis had 8. They had 4 sacks as a defense. And for Mizzou, Trotter, one of their linebackers, had 13 total tackles in this game in a TFL. Honestly, look, when you look at it before the game even came down and got underway, this would have been a very intriguing game for the CFP, because who knows? If Mizzou would have won this game, they could have a chance of still being alive in this. Oklahoma themselves essentially saved their opportunity here and extend that with this win. But it would have made things a lot more intriguing for sure. Tough way to go out, though. Alright, moving on to number 15 USC at number 7 Oregon to start off what would be a very intriguing 3:30 slot. Like, what more is there to say when I talk about all this? But nevertheless, Oregon would be at a little bit of a disadvantage, at least that's what people would tell you, simply because Gary Bryant Jr. and DeCorian Moore were out of this game. But it became very evident very quickly that didn't matter all too much. I mean, yes, USC themselves, under Jacoby Lane's watch, would get themselves on the board first. Makai Lemon, of all people, capping off the drive, because that's about right. But they got early contributions from both Malik Benson and this McClellan person, before Davison wasn't familiar with who this running back is, because you'd normally see Whittington in the game, and he was still getting his reps and all. But this dude on this play right here, man, he had the most aggressive cut back to the inside and just burst past right all the defenders with elite speed to get this score and give Oregon their first touchdown of the game. But very quickly, a little bit of madness started to ensue, at least for USC. I mean, Oregon kept it rolling. You know what I'm saying? Kenyon Sadiq burning people right over the seam for this 8-yard score right here. I don't know why they didn't account for him there. Like, he's too versatile of a tight end for that. I mean, they already gave him one earlier in the draw, and he quite literally was lining up out wide. That's how easy Oregon felt it was for him to go out there and get his. There was no stoppage of that whatsoever. USC had some responses early on, though, at the very least. This Hines dude, Tanuk Hines, brother was making some plays. It does not help for USC, though, because they did mention this. I have to keep flicking back and forth through the game. But I did catch this graphic. In the game to start out, they already had 6 different offensive line combinations. Already. The fact that they had been managing to even get down the field and do anything with that in mind is a miracle in and of itself. But that would start to eat away at them very soon. Hines would make sure that they could weather the storm a little bit. Not only did he come up with a 40-yard catch on this drive, but off of a double pass reverse, they had Lemon throw a decent pass towards the end zone, and Hines himself gets up, gets a foot down, and muscles the hell out of the defender for the touchdown to give USC the tie here. It all went to shit after that. All of it. I mean, going up against a team like Oregon, you can't make too many mistakes, let alone having them happen in a row. And what exactly happened in this game? Well, in just a matter of 3 different possessions, USC managed to give up a damn 85-yard punt return touchdown to the aforementioned Malik Benson for a score, veering it all the way over to the right side of the field. The punter himself was the one man left as the last resort and last line of defense. That shit would fail mightily. And Benson made light work of that. They throw an interception, Mayava does. As I don't really know how to explain this one. Yeah, you're in a bit of a desperation spot, 3rd and long, but I don't know how to explain this one. I can't really give him an excuse here. And then Oregon would promptly go right back down the field, battling through a number of different penalties. But they would get a touchdown from none other than Bryce Betcher, their stud fucking linebacker, that I did not see. I'm like, okay, he got in the end zone. That's pretty bold. USC would try to go and respond themselves, but they missed a damn field goal. And it just kept on going from there. I mean, at the very least, they got a little bit of retribution as Kennedy of the Oregon defense would intercept the Mayava pass before Dante Moore, who not only started this game off accurately, but if you remember last week, had 90% completion against Minnesota and set something like or near a school record for Oregon when it came to completion percentage in a game. Yeah, they managed to make him make a mistake. Urlacher of the USC side would get the ball. I'm not sure if there's a relation there. I can't be asked about that. That is something I would definitely have to investigate. But either way, his contributions would prove to be fortuitous, as Lemon would yet again, in the flats this time, get himself in the end zone for a score to shorten up the lead. But the Ducks charged right fucking back and had Kenyon Sadiq get in that sweet spot yet again, expose the entire defense. I think on the same play, he hurdled a man. And he was right back in the promised land to give them another 2-possession lead. You can't really rag on USC too much. I mean, they were trying to fight back. I also don't know why these tight ends were trusted too for this team. They weren't on shit this game. But that's a different story for a different day. However, USC, we know what their defense is. We know. And this is a struggle that Lincoln Raleigh is still dealing with. At some point, it becomes an identity issue. I wonder if people are still contemplating that he should be leaving USC at this point. They have not really found too much success. Even if Caleb Williams did go and get himself a Heisman Trophy win under his guidance, it's like, dude, what do you really have to show for it? When it counts, not much. And I mean, for all the stuff that Mike Norvell Jr.'s been getting, I mean, hey, they reported that he was coming back in 2026, as shocking as that might be to some people. So, I don't know. You should be asking similar questions when it comes to Lincoln Raleigh at this point, to be honest. As Noah Whittington would extend the lead to give them the 42-27 victory against this Trojan squad in what would typically be your traditional early mid-2010s Pac-12 Classic on the Pac-12 network. Damn. Think about that shit. Dante Moore had 257 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception on 73.3% completion. Noah Whittington had 104 rushing yards on 19 carries and a score. That man is legitimately a threat in open space. I don't know about him being a pure runner and how that would translate into the NFL, but the man is a fucking explosive player. You can't teach that fucking ball carrier vision and elite change of direction that brother has. What can you do? There's almost no game plan for it sometimes. Kenyon Sadiq would have 6 receptions for 72 yards and 2 touchdowns to lead the way for their receiving game. I don't know why they didn't track defensive stats here, but hey, to each their own. Look, like Mayava, 306 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions on 58.1% completion is definitely rough, but dude, when you're telling me that the entire team ran for just 61 yards on 2.3 yards per carry, I'm sorry, is Oregon really supposed to, at that point, and granted, they still couldn't stop the pass that much. The pressure got there sometimes. They did force them into some mistakes, but yo, if you can't balance that shit out with the run, like, you're going to struggle. It is what it is. Tanuk Hines had 6 receptions for 141 yards and a touchdown. Jacoby Lane had 6 receptions for 108 yards. Lakai Lemon had 7 receptions for 34 yards, 2 touchdowns as well. And McCree, one of their tight ends, had 31 receiving yards and a score on 3 catches. All right. Let's see. Moving on to TCU at number 23, Houston. By this point, TCU had effectively eliminated their opportunities of vying for a conference championship bid after losing to BYU in such an unconvincing fashion. Because BYU is actually that good of a fucking team, and that will be proven later on in the night. But focusing on this game, there was still an opportunity for them to play spoiler against a Houston team that somehow found their way at the top of the Big 12 standings, or at least are still, at least entering this game, one of the top 3 teams by conference record in the Big 12. And you're still just thinking to yourself, how the fuck is a team led by Connor Weigman, of all QBs, in the upper echelon of any conference? We know, do we recognize what this nigga was doing at Texas A&M? Do we realize that? As much as you want to rag on Jimbo Fisher, don't bring that name up to Texas A&M fans. You might give him hell for what he wasn't doing during his tenure at Texas A&M, despite getting paid all that money. But it did not help that Weigman in the big games, not too dissimilar from Garrett Nussmeier, okay? He would not perform in big games. You could argue that maybe this is low stakes, but I don't know. If you are still ranked as Houston at this point, you're trying to win out and get yourself in the conference title game by any means possible. And you cannot drop this. You can't underestimate TCU like they are nothing. They tried to mess around, though, early. It only took the first few plays for McAllister to get active for this TCU team, and that would be exacerbated by the fact that he had tapped a nigga. 33 yards for a score, already having 19 receptions of 20-plus yards at that point, which happens to be the most in either the nation or the conference. And you let one of the more explosive wide receivers in that metric get open early and often. That's a bad sign. Despite that going down, though, both defenses would eventually tighten up only after TCU took a 14-0 lead, with Dwyer getting this other one. It was boy. You get off to that hot of a start, and I mean, you think back to it, TCU had a similar start against Arizona State earlier in the season, and we remember what happened in that game. Arizona State being the comeback kids that they are. And they were trying so hard. Again, flickering back and forth. I didn't catch every single aspect of this game, but it's revealing. What is more revealing, actually? Because you have to credit Houston's defense. They literally forced 3 straight possessions in the second quarter alone. Turnovers to end off every single one of them. Back-to-back interceptions from Hoover on back-to-back possessions, including one that granted them an opportunity to prevent a score, clearly. If this was caught all the way on their own 7-yard line, probably trying to check out some crazy shit deep. And while they would manage to get a touchdown in between that with Thomas, one of the Houston wide receivers, getting in from 15 yards out, the fact that you don't make something out of every single one of these possessions is a crime. Like, they forced this second interception, and they get 92 yards down the field, and for whatever reason, you get into a 4th and goal to go situation, and a pick is thrown. Really? Really? Okay. Like, that is just not something that can... That is criminal. They remained at 14-7. And, I mean, again, the onslaught of defensive struggle continued. Up until Houston continued themselves to force Hoover into interceptions. It took another one. This time, making it the second pick for the same person here in James, to then drive all the way back down the field themselves and finally get a score with none other than Dean fucking Connors to tie up the ball game. Okay, every single possession that follows this is just, I don't know. You got multiple 3-and-outs here, and while TCU would give themselves the lead late, just before I cut this game back on to see how things would pan out, because Houston was making progress, but they had initially missed a field goal here. But no worries. They forced TCU into a turnover on downs eventually, and I was watching that go down, that entire drive, TCU is working their way back into it, trying as hard as they can to protect the ball. And at that point, you have to. You're playing a more conservative style, keeping it out of the air at this point as you get into goal-to-go territory, and I do respect that. I was all for them going for the win in that situation. If you were getting taken to the brink by this team, who again, they're not necessarily a good team, but this would prove to be an upset and would derail Houston's season if you win this. Unfortunately, the run call was weak and they just swarmed Denman in the backfield by this McCutcheon dude making a TFL. From there, Houston had a chance. They had a fighting chance because not only would Thomas get loose for a 23-yard gain down the field, they somehow, some way allowed Connor Weigman to get out in space and scamper for a 38-yard gain down the field. All they had to do was run the ball and really just get it to the side of the field that the kicker wanted on at this point. They themselves were not trying to turn the ball over. They just wanted to give themselves a fighting chance to do some kind of scoring. And I mean, to their offense's credit, they got in the position they need to be in. You're like this should be a routine field goal, right? This Sanchez dude would miss again. At the exact moment that he fucked this kick up, Sonny Dykes knew this game was a fucking wrap. Like, I don't think that he was calling him this directly, but as I was told, you get a replay of him mouthing something off, and he just blurts out piece of shit. I don't think he was calling this Sanchez dude that, okay? Or, well, no, the Houston coach was in this situation, I should say. My fault. Nevertheless, tough. Like, you are the Cougars in this situation, and you win the turnover battle that consistently, that convincingly, but again, cannot overcome just some brutal offensive ineptitude for drive after drive after drive on end. Moving on to the numbers here. Josh Hoover had 293 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions on 72.7% completion, while Payne had 103 yards rushing on 18 carries. Joseph Manjack IV had 9 receptions for 95 yards, and Eric McAllister had 4 receptions for 79 yards and a touchdown. As for Houston, Connor Weigman had a combined 275 yards with 161 passing on 51.7% completion with 2 touchdowns and an interception. Dean Connors in this game had a total of 17 touches for 122 scrimmage yards and a touchdown. Thomas also added 5 receptions for 72 yards and a touchdown in this game as well. This Alarms Orga from TCU, though, how about 14 tackles and 2 TFLs in this game? That's honestly incredible stuff. And for the Houston side, the aforementioned James with 5 tackles, 2 interceptions, and 2 pass deflections. Those efforts were definitely admirable, but did not lead to victory for that team at the end of the day. Moving on to another fairly compelling game, because if you thought Pac-12 football was enough to enhance and increase your appetite, if you thought that a defensive struggle in Big 12 football with that realm of chaos could do the job for you, well, you couldn't have possibly seen this game coming then. especially with the styles of play that both of these teams have had throughout the entire season, even with it working out much better over the year for Utah. Now, I didn't watch enough of the game in this first half, but when you look at the totality of everything, even if you are a person that prefers defense or offense, low scoring or high scoring, whatever you want to call it, I don't think there's any denying that this was probably the best game of the week and is potentially a college football game of the year candidate. The way that both of these teams went at this shit, I'm not going to lie to you. Because we get down the stretch of the game. I'll do this and I'll bring it all together. Because I watched this, especially as both teams were chipping away at each other towards the tail end of the third quarter. Like, the fact that Utah was down by this much in and of itself put them at a huge risk, given how they like to operate through the run and aren't necessarily hell-bent on stretching the field like this. They are trying to break a defense's will. They're not trying to have so much explosive plays over the top unless it's opened up by the run game, I should say. And it wouldn't really take much of that. You know, they did have a 15-plus yard catch, but they relied mostly on Daniel Bray to get them down the field and at least set the tone for that drive. With the sweep play that they continue to give him, then you get down the stretch and they put Dampier out of the game, substitute in Bird Ficklin. Okay. And somehow, some way, he managed to get through one of the tighter gaps imaginable, get himself a score to give them a short but somewhat important lead, right? 35-31. It takes a hell of a long time for the Wildcats themselves to counterpunch, but they certainly had a counterpunch. Even if the Jackson player, running back for K-State, slowed down a little bit from the tremendous fucking first half that he had. Again, I'll bring it all together. He would still manage to get the volume he needed to produce. And ultimately, you got in a goal-to-go situation where Avery Johnson would get one over to Garrett Oakley, and he hit a little dance move and everything like that. It gets weird with them on fourth downs because they constantly sell the fucking Avery Johnson scramble. Teams game plan for it and have understood this for quite a long time. And hey, it managed to work. The touchdown pass would prove to be significant for Johnson, though. He would tie for the most passing touchdowns in K-State history with Will Howard with his 47th. Interesting. Okay. The Wildcats would have a little bit of success on back-to-back drives against this Utes squad, forcing them into some rough real estate in terms of being able to mitigate the damage in the run. This is the identity of that Utah offense. It's not going away. They're stubborn as hell with it. They want to impose their will, but Obiazur on one of these would promptly stuff Dampier for a very short gain after already forcing them behind schedule to get them into a third and long situation. Then on the next drive, they forced a fumble on Dampier yet again with one of the K-State players. I shit you not, his last name is Stufflebean. I didn't know that. I wasn't prepared for that shit. I'm not going to lie to you. He would get them the ball back. And through all of that, the K-State squad would get themselves an extra 9 points between a field goal and then Joe Jackson bursting right through the gut, getting himself a 24-yard rushing touchdown before Johnson was promptly intercepted by Johnson of the Utes. And there would be a pick 2. Slowly but surely that would become very important. It would. Because the Utes, I think that play right there might have motivated them to turn things up. And they just went with a nice balance of running and passing, getting a few lethal gains down the field between some of their perimeter guys. And ultimately, they would be able to convert a 4th down with Wayshawn Parker getting enough yards for the first, and then having Simmons be such a reliable target for them on this drive as well. Got up and over a man for a 20-yard touchdown catch after already having multiple 10-plus yard gains on this drive. It felt like they could rely on him heavily down the stretch. And before you knew it, the Utes themselves, defensively, they were sticking to their guns as well, especially in the rushing attack, making sure that Jackson was not a factor, forcing Avery Johnson to throw the football, and they didn't find much success with that at all. Snowden himself, the two-way man, Utah wants to produce a lot of two-way players. He would read that extremely well. You had a shorter route from Tibbs, shadowed him the whole way. And ultimately, once they met at the summit, he had absolutely no way of escaping this. The Utes would get themselves near the 2-minute warning, and from there, the game was on the line. 4th down, they put it on Dampier's shoulder. That brother came through. K-State, that was the last thing that they could allow, but you had Dampier just burst right through multiple defenders, get in the perfect gap of that defense, and just explode for a 59-yard rushing gain on essentially a power for quarterback run. Just ran to perfection, blocked it up perfectly, and he was almost gone. They caught up with him a little bit, but by that point, K-State is as defensive as they need to be. Ultimately, it would be Devin Dampier again to give them the advantage with less than a minute on the clock. K-State still had an opportunity given that timeouts are given once you pick up first downs. If not for Joe Jackson, I couldn't really tell you where this team would have been in this game. Like, the passing for Avery Johnson was rough and would get even rougher as a result of this. Because this is one of the most inexcusable passes I've ever seen in my life. Like, honestly, with the way that this play set up, the coverage was great, but he had room to run at that point. And instead of running, instead of protecting the football, instead of keeping the drive alive, in an efficient, reasonable way, he decides that he wants to play some hero ball, and he fucking goes over to his left, throws it back across his body ever so slightly, and what do you know, a Utah defender, Barton, lurks his ass, gets the easiest pick of his life to end off the game in an anticlimactic fashion. I would have loved to see K-State drop the ball down the field, but that was some bullshit. So at that point, you don't deserve to win, especially after being in a spot where you held a 12-point lead in the fourth quarter. Before that, pick 2. And it's brutal with the way that this went entirely. You want to talk about offense. 98 points total. A combined, look at the total net yardage, I should say, before saying this. Hold on. A total of 1,125 yards. And that ain't even the most of it. I mean, again, passing-wise, Dampier was okay. 259 yards passing on 54.5% completion and 2 scores. Johnson, like I said, it was poor, man. 102 yards and a touchdown and an interception. But again, when you can run a ball like that, when you have multiple teams who can run the football like this without a defense being able to really stop them, it's like, damn, hey, what can you do about that? Now, Utah themselves, typical day at the office for them, about 294 yards on the ground as a team, with Wayshawn Parker leading the way with 19 carries per 100 yards in 5 total touchdowns on 6.1 yards per carry. It's a standard day at work for them. That's pretty respectable, I'd say. Until you see what their defense allowed K-State to do. And more specifically, Joe Jackson. Instant breakout game. The man had 10 rushes for 236 yards in the first half. This is already on pace to be one of the most prolific rushing days for any running back in college football history. Because if I'm not mistaken, 236 would have him on pace for 472. And I believe that the record is somewhere around like 408, I want to say. Let me double check that. All-time single game. 427. I'm thinking about, geez, a little warp there. I was definitely thinking about Melvin Gordon III's game. Still, he would have outpaced both that and Samaje Perine if he had kept up the same pace. Now, that Utes defense, again, tightened up on him a little bit, but he still finished with a definitely season high, probably career high, in school record 24 rushes and 293 yards in 3 scores on a day where K-State as a whole ran for 472 yards on an insane 11.2 yards per carry and 5 touchdowns and still lost. Big 12 chaos in a nutshell. This is how it goes offensively. Though you'd usually see backyard style football with teams slinging the ball all over the place. No, that was not how this game went. They were running it down each other's throats. And even if there was a brief moment of stoppage, neither team could really do that too consistently throughout this game. This is the potential that K-State had, but again, everything else is just so wrong that it's like this is exactly why they are 5-6 right now. Meanwhile, Utah keeps their CFP chances in like pretty good condition. I mean, you know, they're still right in the middle of everything. Hey, this could have gone so far left. You do have to credit them for being able to come back from such a lead and get the win in that situation, though. Like, truly, like that's respectable. What's not respectable in this game is this game right here. And look, man. the triple option ass school, okay? They started off this season 8-0. Why has every other game since then been tremendously close for no reason at all? And they already put themselves in a dangerous territory. They are very much on the fringe of CFP contention after the loss to NC State. But, you know, with the rest of their schedule, aside from the fact that they have to play Georgia to cap off the season, like they did last year, you know, if they can survive a few of these games here, they should be okay, right? Nope. Hell no. I don't know what it was. Like, you have to credit Pitt's defense for putting their attack overall in some vulnerable positions. But it gets to a point where I just don't really understand what the fuck you're doing. Like, you get to this drive right here, and you just operate it in such a weird manner. You're stuck in your own territory, and I don't know, although your defense does a great job with Manly getting a sack on Heinschel to force a punt themselves, I don't know what was going through their heads between Haynes King taking it upon himself to lob a fucking football on a swing route out to their short running back. Like, I don't know exactly what the game plan was there. And ultimately, the Panthers, they started pouring it on. Who would have thought? Like, even Narduzzi, they kept going back to the Narduzzi quote before the Notre Dame game. Because he knew he was going to get his ass kicked by that Notre Dame squad. It promptly happened. But they like, you know what, we good. We good. We know this is not really going to go too well for us. But if we can manage to get every other game in and get in the conference championship, we know we got a fighting chance. Oh, they would play like it. They would play like it too. Now, yes, they were down Desmond Reid. That didn't matter because this Turner running back had an all-around game and would get us started with a monster 33-yard gain up the field before Heinschel would get a dime over to Johnson, one of their other wide receivers, from 31 yards out with no Georgia Tech man in the area. Aside from a guy trying his hardest to hang on for dear life, and it still didn't matter because the man got open. He got open and he broke loose right in the middle of the seam, dude. To add even more insult to injury, like, you go the next two drives with Georgia Tech turning the ball over on downs. And then having Haynes King, like, he's staring him down the whole time. And Baines Marquez. I kept getting confused with this name because I saw it at multiple points last week. So, you just give up freest interception to him. And what happens on those drives? Back-to-back touchdown scores. One from 19 yards out to Holmes. Also, just getting loose in space and exposing a vaunted Georgia Tech defense. At this point, you're already at a disadvantage here. Already. If you're facing this kind of lead and you're asking an offense of Georgia Tech's identity to try to respond. Okay. Then, you had them also, in between giving some more reps to Johnson and Turner, Jay Goff would get in the end zone. No, not Jared Goff. Jewels Goff is his name. Any and everybody was getting theirs against this Georgia Tech team at this point. I mean, it just kept getting worse. Like, there was a situation where Georgia Tech, needing quick scores at this point, did actually have a chance to hit one of their guys out of the backfield. Like, you have him running up the field, slipping past the line, and he's open. He's wide open. If it's thrown perfectly, it's a touchdown. And Haynes King fucking overthrows the nigga, man. Just that kind of night. And it took them to literally spot Pittsburgh 28 points before they finally decided to do something. It would be Turner and Heinschel working their way down the field collectively to eventually have Heinschel rush in for a 3-yard touchdown run. Like, at that point, I'm like, forget the notes. Forget the game, in a way. Because Pittsburgh has already got this sealed. But Not so fast. That's not how it works in college football. Anarchy is the name of the game. It's never that simple, right? I wasn't paying that much attention to it, granted, because you typically don't expect them to come back from a 28-point lead. But at the same time, slowly, Georgia Tech started to chip away. And they would get themselves back-to-back touchdown drives with Haynes King rushing in for a touchdown and then getting a touchdown pass over to Canyon from 5 yards out as well to somehow make this a 2-possession game at the end of the half after all that. Wow. Crazy. But in no time, they'd be right back on the defensive again, having to literally climb a whole gauntlet just to get back in this game. And it was self-imposed. Because you do a nice job if you're Georgia Tech of getting down the field between Canyon making himself get open for a 33-yard gain, between you driving mightily with Haynes King into the red zone, and then goal-to-go territory for Georgia Tech here. You're right there, 5 yards away from making this a 1-possession game relatively, I'm not even going to say early, it's past the halfway mark of the third quarter at this point, but at a reasonable point, you still have enough time to mount multiple drives afterwards. Just get the one here. That's all you got to do, I think. Tries to go for a short route. And Lovelace, the backer for Pitt, was there the whole way. Was hovering around, trying to get a read on his eyes. And ultimately, as soon as that ball was thrown, in came Lovelace from one of the sides. And he turned right upfield with the ball in hand for a 100-yard pick six. In an instant. Now they're back down by 21, still trying their absolute hardest to claw back into it. And it would, again, take them a while. They would endure another turnover on downs. The defense was at least holding up at this point. And, I mean, compared to what was going on legitimately in just the first quarter alone, like that in and of itself is great progress. Ultimately, they would pay it forward with Georgia Tech driving all the way down the field to have Jamal Haynes get in for a 3-yard rushing touchdown, and would later, after forcing Pitt, I watched this, get into a turnover on downs themselves. They had a nice effort to get back down the field with Canyon getting fed overall, starting off with a 24-yard catch and ending it with another 5-yard touchdown pass to him, just getting completely big. Like, he's definitely got some height to him. I don't necessarily know which specific cornerback was on him at the time, but clearly from a size matchup, it was not one going in Pitt's favor at that point. But, hey, 1-possession lead. They kick it off deep because you are, in a way, trusting your defense at this point if they've held up for this long. What's one more stop? Turner said, fuck all that. Fuck it. Because he gets right in the middle with some great interior blocking. You're just moving people out of the way at that point. He's got nothing but green grass in front of him. And he uses his speed advantage at that point, gets the burst at the right time, and just like that, he booms right ahead for a 56-yard touchdown run to effectively end Georgia Tech's chances of winning this game. Despite their efforts to come back, they would lose 42-28. CFP rankings, as of the recording of this video, are set to come out pretty soon. They're gonna fall. How much? when you look at style points and the fact that they made this a one-possession ball game somehow, despite being down 28-0, I really don't know. It's at the end of the day, the committee is making their decisions. It's really going to be how, based on how each of their people look at it. I could say one thing, but really, there's no uniform way for me to understand what is going on in each and every single one of their heads. It's impossible at this point. But as for Pittsburgh, it's a strong win, dude. A very strong win. Heinschel, Holstein gets taken out and benched because of how poor he'd been playing. Heinschel had been playing for a while and somewhat well, okay, but this is definitely one of the bigger games he's had in his career. And what does he do? 226 yards passing and 3 total touchdowns on 74.1% completion. That is no small feat. Credit to you, dude. And the same goes for Turner. We know that Desmond Reid is definitely their best skill position player. I don't think that's a secret anymore. But Ja'Kurian Turner, as I'm seeing here, dude, popping out for fucking 21 rushes for 201 yards. And he got his touchdown late. At least he got on the board with that, because that would have been criminal. But it's damn, hey, you're building something. Post Desmond Reid, potentially, if he can come out and have a performance like that in a pivotal game for them. Pittsburgh, with that, by ACC conference standings and records, are still in the running for a conference championship bid with this win. Johnson had 6 receptions for 91 yards and a touchdown. As for Georgia Tech, Haynes King had 333 total yards and 3 total touchdowns, along with 2 interceptions on 65.9% completion. Jamal Haynes had 10 receptions for 39 yards and a touchdown, and Malik Rutherford had 6 receptions for 68 yards, while Canyon had 4 receptions for 67 yards and 2 scores as well. And for the game action, moving on to number 11 BYU at Cincinnati for one of the nightcap games. Because compared to all the other ones that were going on, Cincinnati themselves were in TCU's position. Hey, BYU, ironically enough, in this game, had a chance, as they mentioned, at multiple points to clinch the win in an Arizona State loss, which I do not believe, if I look at everything here, that Arizona State lost to fucking Colorado. And if they did, well, hey, they clinched. Yeah, as I see that they got beaten 42-17. Prom. What the hell is going on, man? So, no, either way, they don't know that. They're not watching or really even keeping up with that game. They got to handle their own business against Cincinnati. Both of these teams, when you do think about it, in terms of what they plan to do offensively, are relatively the same. Engineered by an elite quarterback running back duo. Although, at this point, Sorsby is just such an enigma. He can be elite, and then he'll just have these dud football games. I don't really know how to describe it. They have solid wide receivers on the outside as well, and one would become pretty important for Cincinnati as we progress into it. BYU's defense is probably a bit more respectable, but Cincinnati has definitely been able to hold their own in this football season, especially when their offense hasn't gotten contributions at all. Aside from a few games, I don't even need to remind y'all what happened to them when they played against Utah. Man, as far as this game goes, I mean, defensively, even with the first couple of drops, they just, you already let LJ Martin get going, even out of the backfield, as he just took one little dump off from Bachmeier, shrugs off multiple defenders, and has enough speed to get a 26-yard gain off that. Is with the way this game got, field position was going to be everything. You had them on a 3rd and long in their own 25-yard line. Probably would have been good to get that stop right there. Hell no. That would not happen. And promptly in the next drive, they would allow them to continue gashing them in the running game. You can't give BYU that. You just can't. You will ultimately lose that fight. And instantly that happened as LJ Martin and Baron Bachmeier would get them down the field, with Bachmeier taking it right up the gut and scoring. Man. As for Cincinnati, they were trying. They were trying. I mean, this drive right here, this 3 and out, they were backed up deep in their own territory. Understandable. But this one, a turnover on downs in the situation, and you were making great progress. Prior, their running back is pretty fucking elite himself. And he would have multiple big runs on this drive just to get them in territory before it would be on the hands of Brendan Sorsby to get them ever so close to converting it into a goal-to-go opportunity. But their other change of pace guy in Walker would be stuffed right at the line by a stout BYU defense. And really, for most of the rest of this first half, Cincy, on their front, kept BYU out of striking distance for the most part. Aside from them, and even to their credit, having one single drive get in the red zone. But they held up nicely. Will Farron's an automatic kicker in that range, but that drive could have been a lot worse for them. Nevertheless, before we even get to that, you had Cincy miss a field goal as they got a short field to work with, but they would promptly manage to hold BYU to a punt, and ultimately had one of their guys in Allen pull off an elite double move on his front. Like, he literally said, loop de loop, right? The defender, he bit on it so fucking badly that by the time Allen turned back up the field, he's already like fucking 10 yards off of him, trying his hardest to recover, and it was way too late. It was beautifully thrown, and Allen was in great position to get it. With that catch, though, Allen would be tied for the 3rd most receiving touchdowns in a single season in Cincinnati history. Tremendous credit to him. And honestly, if you're making plays like that over the course of the year, I can see why that would happen. But BYU, ultimately, as I mentioned, would respond with a field goal of their own. And while Cincinnati had a decent chance, they got some solid enough plays to wear out some time, wear out some of BYU's momentum as well. And while this would look promising, I don't know what was going on with their kicker in this game. I'm not going to lie, because the first one was a standard miss. Okay. These misses continue to progressively get worse. Progressively. Like, you could have tied up the ball game at this point. That shit sails wide of the fucking uprights, dude. It doesn't even come close. and it keeps Cincinnati down by 3. But hey, they get the ball to start the second half. You know what I'm saying? You have a chance to start off this third quarter right. Nope. Because this is the Sorsby experience. Like, Wall for BYU has been making some waves as a good defender for this team, and generally across the nation as one. But if you're going to throw an interception to him like this as easily as Brendan Sorsby made it for him, like, what did you really think was going to happen, bro? And what does BYU proceed to do on the very next drive? They make this a tough one on the Cincinnati defense. They got to go right back out there, and they grind out this drive. 5 minutes plus down the field, doing what it is they do best. They didn't even need to throw the ball all that much. They had one to Parker Kingston, and along with L.J. Martin getting out of the backfield for one, that was really about it. Imposing their will consistently, and there was nothing that Cincinnati could do about it, with L.J. Martin banging right in for a touchdown run. At this point, all hell was about to break loose for the Cincinnati team, because, again, you get a solid drive here. You do get a damn near 50-yard field goal that you have to settle for as a result of everything, with them being forced behind the schedule off of a penalty and then a TFL. That's naturally tough. But Rusnick, before this game, as a graphic would show legitimately after this, he had made a high, and I mean a high percentage, of his last, 24 field goals, I want to say. He has been pretty accurate on the year. So when you see that he would make yet another gaffe and whiff this fucking hard on another field goal in the game, oh my goodness. You're leaving points on the board against a BYU team literally in contention for conference championship CFP. Did you lose the plot or something? Because there's just no way that you were constantly finding yourself in this situation. Even Rusnick was about to lose his fucking mind, because he knows that he's that good. Must have been something in the air tonight. I don't, man, that is rough, dude. And it gave them, the Cougars, a chance to put this thing on ice entirely. If not for the way the Cincinnati defense held up at times in the red zone, especially when it comes to this one, they would have been screwed. Because they continued to get massive rushing gains down the field and still held up for long enough to prevent BYU from getting the final punch. A field goal they had to settle for here. Now, that's not too bad. But all these self-inflicted wounds just continue to hurt Cincinnati. And again, even without me watching those points specifically, I had to just keep checking back in every now and then, wondering what the hell was happening. Brutal fumble by the main man of the hour in Cincinnati, in Allen, with a damn fumble in BYU territory as you're driving to make this a one-possession game. But what do you know? Your defense early on still manages to get a stop and force a punt. And it literally takes you until what would be one of your final drives of the game for you to finally get it in your mind that you need to try to keep as much pace with this BYU team as possible. If you let them dictate it, you're going to lose. But hey, from 19 yards, Caldwell would get in for a touchdown catch to make things somewhat interesting at the tail end. But again, with all the turnovers in play, with the fact that BYU had control in pretty much every pivotal point of this one, that would be ill-fated. All they proceeded to do was ram right down the field. Just get solid gain after solid gain before punching it in for a touchdown score themselves. O.J. Martin getting one from 33 yards out on what had been a dominant night for him. Pretty dominant night. And that's what it comes down to. You could not stop them from running the football at all. Even if you did have some cases where they were forced to pass, you didn't force them to deviate from their sense of normalcy. And you couldn't protect the football. And you lost 26-14. Bachmeier himself had 168 combined yards with 127 passing on 60% completion. Definitely not as strong of an outing as one would expect from him given some of his past few games. But at the same time, when you can run as a team for 267 yards on 5.6 yards per carry and have your guy in L.J. Martin not only run for just 32 rushes and 222 yards and 2 touchdowns by himself, if this is Cincinnati's identity that they possess, why did he outgain the entire fucking team? By more than 2 times the total yardage. Because Cincinnati only ran for 87 yards in this game on 3.8. And they were going to win. Not to mention, he also led all wide receivers for BYU with 3 receptions for 44 yards out of that backfield as an outlet for Bachmeier on a 3 throws here. You couldn't limit that. You let that man do that kind of work, and you thought you were going to win this game. Okay. As for Cincinnati, Brendan Sorsby had 300 yards on 65.8% completion, 2 touchdowns and an interception, along with 38 rushing yards on the ground. And Allen had 5 receptions for 51 yards and a score. That'll do it for all the game action, but there are a few quick developments here. As I initially saw on a headline, and as I had to make sure to check again real quick, per multiple reports, it has been mentioned that Lane Kiffin was offered a near $100 million deal by LSU with at least a $90 million base and other additional money in terms of incentives and things like that. Over the course of the last few weeks, he's been involved in conversations in some capacity with LSU and Florida. Obviously, both of those schools are in head coaching pursuits at this moment. They have vacancies that need to be filled. And, I mean, why not look at Lane Kiffin? In their view, I kind of understand it. But if you are Lane Kiffin, to me, it's like, why does he want to be hated so much? Like, I remember his days at USC. Like, bro, I think some of them people might still have a strong dislike for that man. You are trying to establish something at Ole Miss, and you've done a decent job at that. Why the hell would you want to leave now? I just don't. I can't bring myself to understand there. Moving into a different situation that I admittedly did not look into like I probably should have. I was intending to once I saw the report. But as mentioned by Adam Schefter per a post from him, something weird happened at UAB. According to it, I guess this was before their game, but for some reason, one UAB player stabbed 2 of his teammates. Like, huh? And even when I saw that initially, I'm like, what? Why? What went into that? Are we being serious right now? It was just totally strange. So, that's on me. I definitely need to still do my own thing in terms of looking at what truly happened. Because I need the context at this point. That's just... It's hard to just see that and just, like... Man, that is just definitely strange. And Cal, after another underwhelming season, despite them starting off fairly well, they would fire their head coach in Justin Wilcox. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.